Gaza is now more than 25,000.
The war grinds on. More than 60,000 wounded.
A devastating war enters its 5th month. A global community divided.
South Africa says this is evidence of genocide. Israel says that's an outrageous accusation.
Now, a new front line emerges. Out at sea in the Middle East, ships are boarded in scenes you'd expect in a movie. These are Yemen's Houthi rebels attacking a British-owned commercial cargo ship in the Red Sea. The Houthis say they're acting in solidarity with Palestine. Since November, there's been 30 attacks.
They are trying to put pressure on the global economy in order to encourage Western states in particular to force Israel to accept a ceasefire in Gaza.
𝗀𝗏𝗏 is from the Washington-based Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
These attacks have really demonstrated the vulnerability of this choke point and of global maritime shipping. Ultimately, they're trying to dissuade shipping companies from transiting that area.
And it's working. With reported backing from Iran, the Houthi rebels are targeting commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea, a strategic global trade route. The Middle East crisis presents danger, but also opportunity. Over $1 trillion in exports flows through Egypt's Suez Canal trade route to Western markets every year. But hostilities in the Red Sea are putting a stop to it. Cargo traffic in the region has dropped dramatically, as some major shipping companies opt for the longer transit route around the Cape of Good Hope, sending supply chain costs soaring. What you need to capitalize on that is preparedness. Unfortunately, at our ports, that's exactly what South Africa is missing. This man is a high-ranking employee at Transnet, the state-run company in charge of our ports and harbors. He asked not to be identified.
We are in a dire status.
Do you think Transnet and South African ports could cope with increased shipping traffic?
If Transnet was managed very well, it would cope. But the problem is that Transnet is not managed very well.
South Africa's major harbors are ranked amongst the worst performing container ports globally, with Durban and Port Elizabeth in the top 30 most congested ports.
The problem is the leadership, and the inefficiency of servicing port users is the one that is a problem in Transnet space, creating problems in our South African ports. And problems in the economy. We're missing out on valuable foreign money, valuable revenue for a stagnant economy. In November 2023, the port of Durban hit a major crisis. Almost 80 vessels and more than 61,000 containers were stuck in the ocean, unable to dock. The reason? Operational challenges, equipment failures, and bad weather. Rosario Sano is the managing director of the Mediterranean Shipping Company, one of the world's largest.
It was a big crisis. It was expected, to be honest. We knew that the equipment was old. We knew that the situation had to be rectified.
It's a crisis a long time in the making. Transnet's been costing the economy for a while. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀 is from Transnet's National Ports Authority. Transnet's own reports are showing that it lost around 200 million rand due to inefficiency.
Yes, no, you're right. We handled less ships. Because of inefficiency, of course, the earnings were reduced.
But that's money lost. That's money in the water.
Definitely.
You can never recover it.
Definitely.
So you admit it's an inefficient port.
What then do we do? Do we sit down and say it is inefficient and do nothing? We recovered.
But that recovery hasn't been enough to capitalize on the increased shipping traffic fleeing from Houthi attacks. Hundreds of commercial cargo ships have not stopped at our ports and are merely passing by the South African coastline. The best way to capitalize on diverted ships is to offer them fuel and restocking. That's called bunkering. Think of it as a floating petrol station, servicing the passing ships at sea. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏 is from the Maritime Business Chamber.
Now vessels are able to get, fuel without going inside the port, and you get all the services that you require, and then you continue with your voyage.
Seeing this ship up close like this, it really puts it into perspective that this thing can make a lot of money. Is that of benefit to South Africa?
We are not benefiting. It's a missed and a wasted opportunity.
Shipping companies are heading to our neighboring countries as our refueling limitations cripple an industry worth billions of rands. This ship and 4 others have been sitting idly since September last year. They've been seized by SARS, which is figuring out how to tax the fuel they supply to passing ships.
So they are detained to be here. They can't move, they can't do anything, they can't do any work, and they can't leave the South African waters up until SARS finishes what they call is the investigation.
While SARS hasn't figured out how to tax existing offshore bunkering companies, government is also not allowing any new licenses. This means this lucrative service, if controversial, is now at a complete standstill. Do you think that's a missed opportunity for South Africa?
Yes, of course. We have bigger problems than the bunkering at this stage. We have to fix other things do have the priority.
Most South African ports are struggling to meet international demand, irrespective of the Middle East crisis with shipping traffic. The backlogs in Durban are a prime example. But to get a better perspective, we're taking to the sky with local chopper pilot 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Copy that.
Time for takeoff. We're only allowed to fly on the white water. That means we cannot get too close to the ships, which are anchored out at sea.
So I often fly along the coastline.
Is it normal to see that many of them?
Not until recently. I once counted 40 vessels.
40 ships?
Yeah. There were more ships in the ocean than fish.
It's a magnificent sight. Largest port in sub-Saharan Africa. And the busiest too, but what makes it inefficient is the time it takes to process those ships. There are over a dozen still waiting out at sea. And that's the problem. And sitting outside the port is costly.
But let's say that the waiting time is probably around 12 days. The cost of one of those vessels is probably around $50,000 per day. It's like $500,000 that is going out due to these delays.
But that's money in the water for everyone.
Transnet itself is losing money. You are failing to deliver on what is expected out of you from customers. That reflects the failure of managing the port system.
Does it make South African ports unattractive to international shipping companies?
Yes, 100%. But there's a big fear that big companies will not come to South Africa anymore. That is not entirely true.
The reality is that South Africa's ports are way too strategic to give up on. International shipping companies need us. But they also can't afford to carry costs that should be avoidable. Anchorage time of 7 to 12 days is unacceptable.
It is.
Internationally.
Look, I'm saying it is unacceptable. I want us to be clear. There are terminals here that are well-classed. They do not have those delays. We should isolate the problem areas, but we have seen improvement.
Yet the ports still have a long way to go, especially in the Durban container terminals.
We're probably doing 12, 13 containers per hour per crane. It should be around 20 and plus. For the last 4 years, there hasn't been any investment.
The criticism is that there's been a systematic degradation of Transnet's ability to service vessels at the ports because it hasn't been buying the equipment that's necessary.
Of course, they are correct, not because people did not know what they needed to do. It's just that that investment did not come.
𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 assures us investment and maintenance are now a priority. But it's too soon to celebrate, with some orders taking up to 18 months for delivery.
The situation is going to improve, not because we're saying so, but because we're doing something. We have people that can step in and keep the economy moving.
With the recent management shakeup at Transnet, shipping operators like MSC are choosing to be optimistic.
Now we are stabilizing the ship, and I'm quite sure that in the very near future we'll be going full steam ahead again. There is a political will to succeed. It cannot fail.
Especially when golden opportunities to boost South Africa's fragile economy are sailing by our shores.